Here we are.
How's it going?
No, it's all right. It's been crazy, but it's all right.
Good. I'm glad. Well, glad to hear the all right part of it anyway. We'll take a deep breath, settle in, come into the space,
Take off my shoes.
take off the shoes,
Um,
give the dog something to nibble on.
well, I'm trying an experiment today, and I hope it works out. But we're working for a no dog zone for the duration.
Okay.
So,
So,
well, I mean, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother you, but
no.
you know, and I guess ultimately it's one of those things that if it happens, you have to deal with it. But I guess I can't help but there's this tendency to try to kind of take other people into account, and there are other people who are participating in a removed sort of way,
Yeah.
but they're still participating. So
But if they get irritated or triggered or some way by the dogs, then that's a really good opportunity for them to do some fifth fetter work. So
yeah, yeah, good point.
it's perfect, right? Everything is grist for the mill.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, it may get to a point where someone's at the door whining, and the only thing to do is just go let them in. So, but we'll try. We'll see what happens.
We'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
Before I forget, did you see that the King Crimson cover? Well,
Oh
cover.
yeah, Vi, Baloo, Carrie, and Levin.
Yeah,
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 a friend sent that to me the other day. I did see that.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm still kind of going back and forth, mixed feelings about it. So
You know, it's a thing. We've been talking about this a lot lately because I just don't have that much. I don't get that much enjoyment out of things, and it's like to spend the money and to you know it's not like it's that far away or anything, but it's just like the payoff just never seems to be there. So I'm really just happy being home. Just not doing
yeah.
anything. I don't really need the extra frills. So it makes it kind of unnecessary. Um, but well, yeah, it's an interesting thing because it's curious to see like how much of that is awakening and how much of it is just sort of like, you know, past trauma and conditioning. So we're kind of teasing apart, why it is.
Well, I was glad to hear you say that because that's been something that's been growing over the last few years or so for me. I mean, I'm hard pressed to point out when it exactly began, or at least became noticeable. But that's kind of becoming more and more the case for me. It's like Suzanne and I will watch. We have a thing for British television, particularly British crime shows, like detective shows.
Okay.
And at night before bed, that's one of the things that we'll do is we'll watch those. But the reality is, if I'm left here by myself, like they Tuesday and Susanna went out of town for a few days. I guess it was about a year ago, and I never turned the TV or the tablet on, not
Yeah.
once.
Yeah.
I mean, I barely use the stereo, which if there are two things I'm going to do along that line, I'll either put music on or I'll come sit down in front of the computer and you know look at things that interest me there.
Mhm.
So it's interesting that you said that because I've wondered about that, and I've wondered is it this process that I have become that has become my day to day life, or is it getting older? Is it some of both? Is it, like you said, trauma and conditioning? Although I was never that way younger. As a kid, even in my teens and 20s, I probably watched too much TV.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a good question because I've wondered that about that as well. I don't know. I mean, for me, going to pay the money to go see that, as much as I was a huge Adrian Belew fan in my teens,
Yeah.
it really comes down to only one little thing that holds my curiosity, and I don't know how long that would hold out because I like Steve Vai as a person. I
Uh-huh.
like listening to his interviews because he seems like somebody who is kind of tuned into this sort of wavelength, more kind of a spiritual bent. but other than his first two solo albums, I've never been a huge fan of his
Yeah.
playing, even though I like it.
Yeah.
All it comes down to is one simple thing. Robert Fripp has probably the most developed and sophisticated right hand of any guitar player on the planet. And to watch Steve Vai have to learn to do that stuff,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
it's not easy. And he even said it in the interview. I don't know if you watched all of it, but he
No,
even said
no,
it in the interview. Yeah, he did. He acknowledged it, which it surprised me because I wondered if he would, and he did. So probably would last for about, I don't know, 30 minutes or so until that curiosity was satisfied. Then I'd rather be home.
no. I know. Yeah, I get that. And it's funny because like you said, I watched way too much TV growing up. And then even when I was taking care of my mom for all those years, we had like every channel you could possibly have. You know, we had all the cable, all the extension stuff, plus like every streaming service. We had so much stuff because we really couldn't do anything else. It was just kind of sit in the house and watch TV. And after she died, I like basically got rid of almost all of it. I had, I think, Hulu, and barely really even watched that. And so it was like it was fine without any of the stuff that we used to spend hours a day doing. It just wasn't really, there was no missing it. It was like when it was there, it was fine, and when it wasn't there, it was also fine. And that's kind of how I am with everything. Like, we still watch movies and TV shows, but it's like it doesn't have that the hook or the need to do it or whatever. It's like if we do, that's cool. This is fun. And if not, also fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really makes it so like you kind of question like spending $100 or more on a ticket for a show. And
Mm.
yeah, what do you really get out of it? Like, yeah, that was fun.
Well,
Yeah.
what killed it for me, I think, was I'd mentioned to you in an email this last week. In 2016, I went through something that a certain group of people, the pragmatic Dharma people over on their Reddit page, diagnosed it as a dark night. I don't
Mm.
know if that's true or not. I mean, I understood their diagnosis. It certainly makes sense, but all I can say is maybe. I don't have a better explanation. So at any rate, after that period of time, impermanence and temporality really became more real.
Mm.
It was something that was taken into account as part of experience. And so there's this recognition of the fact that you can go and you can go to a movie or go to a live performance, whatever it is, and it's fine while you're there. But once it's done, it's done. You can't hold on to it. You can't hang on to it. It doesn't matter. You can record the whole dang thing on your phone. You still don't have it because that's not the same thing as the actual lived experience.
Yeah.
So there's always been this or awareness and recognition of the fact that I can't hold on to it. It's slipping through my fingers as it's happening. Once it's done, it truly has slipped through my fingers. I can't get it back. Memory is totally unreliable. What do I have? Nothing. So why bother? You and I both know if you said this to some people, they would look at you like you had three eyes.
Yeah.
But that truly is reality for me, and I'm sure for you and a lot of other people. That's actually how it plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. And that's where we're we're trying to tease apart to make sure that it's just pure equanimity and contentment and not that, because I have had a thing for the years when I was taking care of my mom where it was like couldn't look forward to anything because inevitably something would, undercut it and it would end
Mm.
up falling through. And so we don't know if there's like just like a hold up of that or like a holdover of that where it's like, I know that everything is A, impermanent, and B, not in my control, and C, completely unpredictable. And so the idea of like looking forward to something and then not doing it, or looking forward to it and having it not play out, the way that you expect or any of that, it's just like, to me, it doesn't seem beneficial to put, um, okay. So on one hand, there's the sort of momentary lived enjoyment of thinking about something, right? Like they've done those studies and they show that we actually get more enjoyment of planning for a trip than we do being on the actual trip.
I've heard about this.
Right. So there's something there to be said for just like thinking that you're going to go to the concert and having this, lovely experience for the months leading up to the concert and then not actually go because you've gotten more out of it for the months that you've thought about leading up to the concert than you might have if you actually went to the concert. Um, but also there's a thing where it's still living in the fantasy world. It's still living, you're not really in the present. If I'm buying a concert ticket that's going to be 6 months later, I could for the next 6 months be thinking about this concert and how great it's going to be and all of that. But anytime I'm thinking about that, I'm not in the now. I'm not present because the concert is
Right.
actually happening. In the moment where you are actually at the concert, you can be completely present, maybe, hopefully, and really be taking it all in. But as you said, hour and a half later, you're back in the parking lot and now you're just in the parking lot. It was great for that hour and a half that you experienced it. And after that, things are as they are. So the question is that hour and a half of enjoyment, if you are really present in it, enough to warrant either the financial cost of it or, traveling or whatever it is that you're putting in to do it. Um, but there's something to be said from the non-dual side of not deriving the attachment to it happening and not even deriving the enjoyment of thinking about it happening because it's, you're lost in thought if you're thinking about it ahead of time. That might be oversimplifying it a bit, and there is a gray zone here where you can also be present but have this kind of like undertone of like excitement or happiness about something without it being necessarily a conscious thought where you're like really picturing it or whatever. We can have those kind of undertones of emotion without overtly picturing what it is. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
I guess we could maybe say that there's something of value to be had in having something that you're looking forward to ahead that gives you this kind of like undertone of of positive feelings before then, even if you're not actually thinking about it. But that's really just kind of playing both sides, or trying to kind of play the middle and not say one is fully okay or not okay. Do you know what I mean? Was that clear?
It makes sense. I just, the thought of spending a fair amount of time lost in vague fantasies or anticipations, thought and mental picture, and the bodily sensation that tends to stir up. I don't know. I guess to put it simply, I mean, what's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, I could do essentially the same thing by just going outside and say working with some of the plants out in the entryway by the front door on a nice day when the sun's out and like today where it's warm without being hot. And that to me, based on my experience, has more depth. The speculating and dwelling on something that's to come doesn't have that tendency to take me out of myself with any kind of depth. I mean, in other words, I can go out and repot plants and stuff like that, and the potential is there for things to open up into a wider experience that in POK they refer to it as unprovoked happiness.
Mm.
It's, which is based on, I can't remember, there's somebody worked this out and they've got I guess a system or a practice for it and I cannot remember what it's called. But anyway, and so being able to go and do something and deepen into that experience and be very much in the present seems and this is all value judgment, I guess, but it seems more meaningful than just getting lost in this internal experience.
Yeah. I agree. I'm with you. I just think for some people, it's going to sound really, that part of it, I think sounds good. I think the idea though of not looking forward to anything or not having, not wanting to do anything special beyond just, sitting in a chair or working in a garden, for some people that sounds really extreme and like, I'm sticking out my
Yeah.
whole life if I can't do that, why can't I look forward to, and you can. It's just that there
Sure.
can also be a sort of a realization or something that it just doesn't need to be, or it doesn't click and work that way anymore. And I think it's just something that happens or on its own. Um, it brings us to the whole like, asceticism versus,
Right.
and it's a long, a long standing debate, and I think there are pros and cons to both of it in measure. But
And there'll never be a final answer either.
no,
You
no,
know, I
no.
think it just simply works out differently for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people would be very satisfied to be able to just live very simply in a very uncomplicated way. Other people, and you and I'm sure you do too. Speaking for myself, I know people who have gone very deeply into this. Have woke up to a very deep level, and they still like to travel, or
Absolutely.
they go out into the world and do things,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely valid and legitimate. And if somebody feels that way, then they should pursue those things. You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely. I think like you said, I think it's a personal thing. And I think, my history came from a place of not really wanting to do much anyway. And so like I think I didn't have that strong desire to do anything before waking up either. And so there was no reason for that to suddenly start happening or suddenly get, um yeah. It just wasn't a thing that developed more after awakening. It really wasn't there much to begin with, and it kind of just stayed not being there. Maybe even became less there than it was.
yeah, and for me, it was kind of a mix of those two. There was a tendency to not want to do much, but at the same time, was a large chunk of my life where basically all of the 90s and early 2000s, well, I'll say the 90s anyway, for sure, that I was almost always on the go, constantly doing stuff, constantly. I mean, I was very seldom at rest and had downtime. So it's kind of a mix, and we've talked about this before. I've been really confused by the fact that after that moment of clearer seeing of the illusion of self becoming really apparent for that brief moment last July, motivation, and I'll specify this, motivation and the ability to follow through on intention
Mm.
have somehow, I think, been affected by that. I mean, it could be other things too. We've had a lot going on in terms of Susanna's health since summer of 2022. And so it could be said that the fact that we've been dealing with such heavy stuff for a prolonged period of time, dogs, so it begins, might be playing a role in that. But at the same time, I noticed there was a very clear line of demarcation there about a week or two after that moment in July. And it's like things that I was trying to do and moving towards and wanting to be doing suddenly just seemed not that they weren't worth pursuing, but there just wasn't that strong urge to pursue those things, And now trying to get any of that stuff done is usually a case of really just cranking up the intention and putting a lot of thought into it until eventually the system just goes and does those things.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It is so complicated though when we're talking about these things to know how much of it's being affected by emotions and external stuff in your environment and just prioritization. And yeah, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't say, you know, it starts to become obviously really problematic in life, then it's helpful to maybe dig a little bit deeper and see, what is coming up in the moments when you feel like you should be doing something but don't want to do it or find yourself not doing it. Is it coming from a place of exhaustion? Is it coming from a feeling of like, "Ah, fuck it, it's not worth it," or is it, coming from just, what, this really just doesn't draw my interest right now, or something else really seems to be more important or more relevant and resonating with that? Do you have a sense of what happens in those moments that you think you want to do something but end up not following through?
I think my sense is, to answer your question directly, that a lot of it probably has to do with a certain degree of kind of burnout because I've been in the position in our family of holding up really everything domestic for a long time.
Mm.
I mean, in 2012 or 2013, we had a conversation about it, and we decided that it didn't make sense for me to keep doing what I was doing because a large chunk of that money was going into paying for daycare.
Yeah,
So why not raise your kid yourself and save the money?
right.
So, and that's fine. I've never resented it, never resented it, but just taking on that much responsibility for such a long period of time, and then you add to that some of the things that have cropped up in the last couple of years, and when you don't have a whole lot of downtime and time to yourself, there was a long stretch where the only time I really got to myself was either when I was asleep or when I was meditating. And so, I think it's not a stretch of the imagination that, there could be some burnout because the things that I'm talking about are things that I like to do. They're things that are important to me. Or, they have a pull to them.
Yeah.
So I think burnout probably is a big portion of that.
That
'Cause
sounds
what
right.
happens is it's like I really need to do that, and I'd like to do that because, like I told you in the email about all the ant business. There's an immediate or a very very near future immediate sort of payoff.
Yeah.
So when the thought process shows up of doing these things as series of steps to get to that near future payoff, there's the desire, but there's also this feeling of just feels good to not move, to just
Yep.
sit here.
That sounds like it could be burnout. Just
Yeah.
absolutely. And we only have so much energy in the tank, and sometimes you just have to really prioritize the what the body needs, and the body might need to not be doing something else. The brain needs to not engage in one more learning activity, or something where you're like really do. You might have to just relax and let things recalibrate and settle down and recharge.
Well, and and I'm not looking to explain it this way. I don't think there's a need to explain it this way. I mean, I could be wrong, but sitting here now, I don't think there is. That I am inclined to say that some of the fruits of this process have played a role in it too, because when you and I'm taking a kind of a guess here because I don't know this for certain. This is just based on my limited knowledge that when you do things to alter and reorganize and otherwise affect identity and the self structure, that it seems like that's going to shake things up a little bit, and some of your motivations, your intentions, your tendencies, inclinations are going to wind up getting turned upside down a bit.
Absolutely, that can happen. Oftentimes, we see that it's the things that are the most egoically satisfying at one point in our life, doing things for the adulation from others, or doing things because it makes me feel good about myself. Um, if you don't feel that need for others' approval or need to reify a sense of self, then a lot of those things might actually fall away. It is fairly common for people to, be really, really into something and then find that they weren't into it for the actual experience of the thing or the doing of the sport or the music playing or the behavior or whatever it is. It was actually in it because they liked that, they felt like they were good at something. They liked that other people told them how good they were at it. Um, it became a way of defining themselves. I am a musician or a basketball player or whatever the thing is that, I'm a writer. Anything that you use as your identifying marker that you develop a sense of pride for, that might go when you lose that sense of a self.
Well, that means there's a need for making some time for some deeper examination because, I mean, right off the bat, I think it's safe to say that it was never something that was directly propping up a sense of self or generating a sense of self, but that doesn't mean that that can't be somehow a part of it at some other level,
Yeah.
you know? So that's worth looking into. But that raises a question that's been kind of coming up a lot in the last, I guess, week or so. And the question is qualifying it by saying, I understand that sense of being someone, that deeper sense of self is later in the Fetter model.
Mhm.
Yet at the same time, I mean, so I understand that, yet at the same time, there's still this question about if the self has been seen through, then what's going on where it feels like there is, where it feels like there's someone here, and that's really not the right way to put it, but I don't know how else to say it. Let me say it by using this as an example. Something can happen that provokes a response.
Mhm.
I'll use an actual one from yesterday. Our largest dog suddenly started barking, and he has a heavy duty bark. I mean, not just because of his size, but he's got an outsized bark, and just an instantaneous reaction. And I said, I'm so sick of these dogs barking. And in that moment, because of that sentence, I am so sick, it set off, there's something that's kind of become ingrained habit when those sorts of things happen, that this inquiry, investigation
Love it.
part it makes an appearance. And so, I'm so sick. And even though it was just not even a full second later, it was removed in time, but I was still able to see it because it had just happened. That when that happened and there was that reaction, there was that thing we've talked about before, that sort of reflective attention that turns back,
Yep.
and a sense in the body. Some of it being, of course, a little bit of adrenaline, from being startled by this sudden loud bark out of nowhere.
Yep.
But it's all that to say is those things show up, the reflective attention, looking back at the being, the sense in the body, and I'm not sure what else. But at any rate, that for that moment was bought into. That seemed real. That seemed believable. It was only when the inquiry, investigation part of the mind turned on that it was, oh, well, you know better than that. You know that's not true. Well, if that's the case, then why is there that buy-in in those moments, because they happen a lot throughout the day, and they often involve a sentence that begins with I or me, or something pointing towards the person. And so that's been coming up a lot, those moments, and the awareness that, man, there's still some buy-in here. You
Yeah.
know, that's weird. And so the assumption is, and I recognize it could be a mistaken assumption, that and trying to take the seeing of the illusory nature of self beyond its actual limits, what it includes. So all that to say is, there's that buy-in, and that has created this question about, well, who, who's there?
Yeah. Yeah. Solid
I,
question. So yeah, so even though we've seen through the first Fetter, then you still have this more subtle feeling of identification that lasts all the way through the eighth. But we notice it particularly with like the fourth and fifth Fetter, like you were talking about, where we really don't want something, or we do feel like we want something or are craving something. The interesting thing about like the example that you gave, like I'm so sick of these dogs barking. You have you have um you have a startle response that starts it, right? You get startled, you feel this feeling in the body. That feeling of being startled is super uncomfortable. So the reaction is not anything to do with the dogs. It's about being startled. So you
right.
have something that doesn't like feeling that jitteriness. That dog is the thing that takes the blame for it because that was the supposed cause of that sensation. But what's interesting is the I am so sick of, right? If we look at it like we can look at it a couple different ways, and they may or may not be 100% scientifically true, but this is kind of how it feels. You have a sentence that comes up, and that sentence is coming up in the moment, right? I am so sick of that we could look at it like it's a self sort of a system reinforcing loop, right? Like we have a system that is trying to stay out of harm's way. It's trying to stay out of danger and feel good and get what the body needs to survive and procreate and all of that stuff. If the system is made in such a way that it can reinforce certain behaviors or stop certain behaviors by hearing these thoughts happen, it's like feeding itself um, data to change its own behavior, right? Like if we think of AI, it can learn by actually seeing what's happening and then readjusting based on what's changed in the environment, how it's if it's trying to move a cube from here to here, if it misses, then it's reevaluating what it needs to do in order to grab that cube and then move it into the appropriate place. And if somebody moves the cube out of its way, it has to figure out how to do it now. It have an inclination, or at least it kind of frees up the self ideology, if we can think about it this way, that it's an automated system which is using this self talk as a feedback loop to say to itself, this is a scary situation. I don't like this feeling, right? I don't know what this is. I don't like this feeling. I am so sick of these dogs barking. I am so sick of these dogs barking. I am so sick of these dogs barking. And it's reprogramming itself to avoid that situation if it can in the future.
Mm,
You have 10 dogs, so you kind of can't. But but in a if you bring it down to a more primitive level, you could see how that sort of thing would work, where if you had, a tiger jumps out of a bush. I hate bushes. They have tigers in them. So now you're going to avoid bushes all the time, right? It's like it's like that kind of thing. Like you're reinforcing what you think is happening. And that there doesn't have to be a self in there who actually doesn't like the bush or the dogs barking. It's a reinforcement tool to try to keep you from feeling that discomfort that you just felt.
right.
And uh, we could look at it like there's even when you're saying the sentence, the I am so sick of these dogs barking, is there something in there that, you said there's a buy-in. But
Mhm.
what does it feel like? Like, what is your felt sense that makes that seem both true and that it relates to a you? Why is that statement potent and believable and influential in a way that just hearing some other random statement doesn't have an effect?
Well, I think it's a number of things. I think one thing is, right off the top is the statement in tandem with all of the physical sensations and other things that I don't know what to call them. I don't know if it's a physical sensation or what. I don't know how to explain that curious sense of reflective attention, of attention turning back on the Darrell entity.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, that's what it looks and feels like, is instead of something pointing out there, and some awareness of the surrounding environment, instead it's now some awareness of what's going on here. So that's one part of it. The other thing is, I've noticed that just saying I or me has a peculiar sort of resonance in the body. And
Mhm.
I was playing around with it earlier this week. I for life of me, I can't remember what set this off, but something brought this to my attention, and so I would experiment with saying I, me, and it only works for the first two or three. After that, it disappears. But the first two or three times, there's this sort of sense of, and it's the word, and of course, that's just a sound, but what that sound represents to the mind, and then again that sense of there something being here. So it seems like it's all of those things kind of wrapped up into each other. And there are other things at work, like there's this assumption, and it's really subtle, but it does seem to be there, that if something is being observed, if there's something that's recognized as being present, then there must be someone seeing it.
Mhm.
But any time that I look, it's always the same thing. You go
Yeah.
look, you don't find anything except for, mind doing its thing, body doing its thing. That's about it.
Yeah.
Yet it still seems to have some, I don't know, it seems to carry some weight.
Yeah, really good insight too regarding we use the terms I and me to actually suss out the sixth and the eighth fetters. Um, because you do, if you say that I or I am, you'll probably get like a, fluttery, energetic kind of a presence sensation. And that's partially what we're talking about when we talk about the I am eighth fetter kind of a sense. Um, so you're right. That is part of what's feeding back into that. I think also there's sort of the memory component is also being pulled into. So anytime that you say like, I'm so sick of these dogs barking, you're also seeing some sort of maybe overt, maybe very subtle flashes of the fact that you have experienced these dogs barking in the past.
Yeah, you're right. I
It
completely overlooked that.
Yeah, it's bringing up historical record to prove why this is something that you have been through before, and damn it, you hate it. You know, it's just it startled you before, it startled you again. There's something really irritating about it, and it's being reinforced by these little memories that are popping up. Um, the awareness turning back on itself is a really interesting one, though, and I think it also gets to that issue of uh well, we'll just go into it. So when you when you have that sense of awareness turning back on itself, what you really have, right? Like in this moment, if you're focusing out, you feel like your attention is focusing out towards the computer screen, right? Or out
Right.
towards something in that range. If I ask you then to turn your awareness to onto itself or turn your awareness onto whatever feels like the I right in this moment,
Hmm.
Does it feel like there is like an actual camera focusing thing which then turns around? Or are you just experiencing this computer screen area being replaced by this internal check-in, the internal check-in of the physical sensations, thoughts, mental images, sounds, things like that? Does it seem like there is an object there which is focusing out right now that stays continuous, that literally just turns its direction? Or is your experience only the computer screen and the wall behind it and all of that? And then is your experience only the internal senses of the body, the physical sensations, mental images, and sounds?
Okay, that's a really good question. Let me see if I can do this.
Mhm.
Not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Okay, hang on.
It's also tricky because you're on the spot.
Try something different,
Yeah.
a change of scene, so to speak. Doing it here now, I wouldn't say that it feels like there is some sort of perceptual device, a camera or whatever you want to describe it as, that turns around. It doesn't, that's not what I'm experiencing. It's more along the lines of what you said, that there's this, and then attention just goes to the body sense, whatever's going on right here.
Yeah. So the implication that there is something which can take in the sights out there and then turn in on itself is just an illusion based on the idea of continuity.
An illusion based on the idea of continuity.
You have the idea that there is a unique perceptual device pointed in one direction, and then if you're seeing something else now, that perceptual device is moving to take in something else and that it's still there. But but there is no perceptual device, even when it's pointing out at the room around you. There is only the visual field of the room around you.
Well, then that seems to beg the question, what in the heck is attention?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. What is attention? What?
Wow, okay. That's a, I don't know whether or not that's something I could answer right here, right now, in a moment. That may be something that I have to observe in action over time, but just for the sake of the dialogue, I would say that, boy, this is kind of tricky.
Mm.
Seems like attention is an intention to notice.
It's an interesting definition because you have the intentionality in that. So
Right, which I'm sure we can pull the rug out from underneath that, can't we?
yeah. Yeah, we very much can. It feels like there is an agency that you can make the choice to focus now on the TV or the computer, and then now move over to something else on the wall, and then you can now turn your head around and look at a guitar, and it feels like you have the agency to do that. But if you actually notice what's happening in your experience, the attention is constantly flipping from one place to another.
That's true. I've noticed that before.
Yeah, and all the attention really is sort of a spotlight of focus on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. So in your experience, you now might be hearing my voice, and that has the primary focus of your attention. If you're focusing on just the visual field, you might notice that whatever is directly in front of the eyes has the most feeling of intention with it, and then everything else just kind of blurs into some sort of hazy mist that you kind of know something's there, but you might not even be able to tell exactly what it is.
Right.
But that's just a point of focus, a point of clarity, really. The feeling of being able to move the attention from one place to another is what's really interesting. That's why, well, one of the many reasons why I tend to prescribe the see, hear, feel practice all the time.
Hmm.
Because unlike most other meditations, what we're actually doing is just allowing the attention to go wherever it wants to go and recognizing how it's doing it on its own, from the bouncing from the visual field, something out there, to a pain in the knee, to a memory of something that happened yesterday, to the sound outside, to, feeling hungry, to another emotional thing that comes up, and just feeling where that's in the body or seeing what other memory. And we're just allowing the attention to go absolutely wherever it goes. But then each time it stops someplace, we just hold it for 2 or 3 seconds and really absorb whatever it is that's in the focus of that attention, and then just let it do its thing again. And you recognize in real time that you are not making the decision as to what is catching your attention. You have, even right now, as you are trying to listen to my voice and look at the screen and all of that, you have no way of really holding the focus on just one of those things. And if the dog barks outside, your attention is immediately going to that new sensation.
Right.
If you have
Yes.
a sudden pain in the foot, your attention is going to that pain in the foot, no matter what I'm saying. If
Right.
you if you have a memory or a thought about something that you have to do later, that all of a sudden it's like, oh God, I forgot, I've got to call the lawyer. Whatever it is, that's taking precedence over anything that I'm saying or that you're doing right now.
That's true.
So that attention is not under your control, but it's really helpful to be aware of it, and seeing what it feels like to have attention is super interesting. So I mean, like right now, you can actually just take a couple minutes and place your attention like on the computer screen and feel what it feels like to actually have your attention focused there.
Okay.
What's giving you the indication that your attention is on the screen?
Well, that there is color, shape, there's movement. I think that's it.
Does it feel like there's something though that is making you more focused on the screen than, say, on the wall behind you?
Repeat that.
Yeah. Is there something in your experience that is making you feel like you have more attention being paid on the screen right now than on the wall behind you?
Well, I don't know that I can give you a different answer than what I've already said. I mean, the fact that there are at least two parts to this motion. There's something happening here. There was also the fact that a question was heard to, can you do this? So that created this inclination or intention to go ahead and do that. But there's also, and it's kind of the big one, the fact that I can't see out of the back of my head to the wall behind me.
But you know it's there, right?
Sure.
If I asked you, are there four walls to the room? You would probably say yes.
Right.
But there is a feeling that you're not really paying attention to it. Like right now, if you weren't, I don't know if you can see your screen, if you can see the wall behind you on your screen right now, but
No, it's just you.
okay, perfect. So that being the case, you don't know if the wall behind you has suddenly come alive and started moving and undulating and swirling and is creating a face that's going to like come out and eat you. You don't know that, right? You have no way to tell that because it's not in your attention. You're not focused on that in any way. You're only focused right now on the screen and what you can see and the movement and the colors and the shapes that are there. But
Right.
there are all these other things which are not in our attention. So what we take to be attention is uh the lone thing that we are focused on to the exclusion of absolutely everything else in the universe.
Repeat that last part again. I want to make sure I took that down.
Yeah, yeah. So what we're calling attention is the awareness of one particular thing to the exclusion of everything else in the universe that you could possibly be aware of right now.
Okay. So attention is nothing more than the ability to take in one thing to the exclusion of everything else.
Yeah.
Okay.
But does it feel like there is a you who is forcefully holding just this screen in your attention and willfully ignoring that wall that has become a monster and is slowly getting closer to you?
It, it, that one's kind of hard to answer because it doesn't feel like there is a definite, hard, clearly defined person doing that. But it does feel like there is the intention to have the will to keep that focus on what's right here.
Okay, so what does that will feel like?
Um,
Go into the physical body too. Notice if there are contractions in different parts which seem to be doing the act of holding of that screen in your vision.
that's exactly where I was going because I was going to say the will to do that does feel like a slight contraction in the body, mainly right. Well, I guess the head's in there too, but mainly it's like from about the belly button to somewhere right. Well, no, the face is in there too because there's some slight contraction or tension in the face. So yeah, in fact, I would go so far as to say that that will is nothing more than the idea of focusing on one thing exclusively and that bodily sense.
Nice. Yeah, I mean the is that bodily sensation, the contraction here in the face, wherever, is that actually helping to maintain focus or attention on one specific thing?
I can't imagine that it is because I can think of times when, I mean, not, I can't recall a specific instance, but there's this sense of there are times where something is taken in exclusively and it's not something where there's a sense of exertion around it.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, just doing it now, I mean, relaxing the body and just setting aside that I'm going to do this sort of
Mhm.
bit. Yeah, you can notice from a totally relaxed place.
Yeah, you can. I think it's something that like Alan Watts talked about, where he said that as a kid, you're taught to focus by clamping down. When you're in school and you're listening or something, but you're not looking right at the teacher, they'll be like, Timmy, focus. And you're like, so I'm focusing, I'm tensing up, I'm opening my eyes, I'm really putting in a lot of attention and a lot of effort to like focus on what you're saying, as if doing this is helping you hear or understand anything any better.
Right.
Has no relation to the ability to understand what somebody is saying or to listen. We can't like physically like do this with our, well, some people can, but most of us can't like physically do this and turn our ears to like hear more of it. But we do that. We feel like we have to look, we have to be intense, we have to tense up all around here. We get like tight as a way of proving that we're in control and listening and doing what the teacher says. And ultimately, it's not doing anything. It's this unnecessary add-on where we feel like we have this sense of I'm in control of the body. Completely unnecessary.
And I can see that. And there are other conversations we've had of this sort about this particular aspect of experience and seeing what's actually going on, where I can see these things. It's kind of curious that you can see it, and you can see it clearly, yet we can get up and walk away from this conversation like all the other conversations.
Mhm.
And that belief in those things is still there.
It's a matter of integration. You've been living with those beliefs for a lot more years than you have had without the beliefs.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's a matter of seeing it over and over in your daily life in a way that really integrates it to where it's not just a really interesting, okay, it's philosophically, I get it. Conceptually, I get it. Seeing it for myself for 30 seconds, yeah, it's clear. Like there's no one in control. There's no attention. I don't need to focus on it. Great. But then you're going right back to doing it again because that's the way that the body has been working for all these years.
Which goes back to where this started about this lingering sense of believing that there's someone here, or a buy-in to certain types of experiences that create the sense that there's someone here. You know, it brought to mind, referring back to July again, for about a week, maybe two after that moment, there was well, it was just really clear that there was no control. And I guess it was it was in the first few days after that I answered the questions from LU. And they asked something in there about, that there's not any agency or control. And I could answer the question honestly, that I could see that. But it's funny because while I know it intellectually, there's still, it's like that reverted somehow, because I don't see it as clearly.
Yeah.
And I will do things, and I'll watch it happen. I'll do things with the idea that if I do this, this will happen. And so an action's being taken in order to get a result. Somebody must believe there's such a thing as control,
Yeah.
which of course, there's also the idea that there's something in there doing that. So all of this stuff, maybe I just need to relax around it and just keep looking at it. But it has been a source of not frustration, not disappointment. Well, maybe mild disappointment. It hasn't been a huge thing, but it has been and it's never been verbally expressed, but just sort of the sense of, gosh, I wish that would go away.
So why is it not okay? I mean, I'll say firstly that even with the planning, right? Like on the relative level, of course, we still make plans. We still, if you're going to go on a trip, you still have to buy the tickets and figure out the itinerary and all of that stuff.
Right.
We're still planning on a retreat right now, and we're making all the material for it and doing all of that stuff for it. So like, it's not saying that there's no ability to plan or any of that. That functionality still works. It's the
Right.
question of, does it feel like there is this, centralized doer of all of it who is attached to the outcome of whether it actually happens or not, how good it is, how bad it is, who's going to feel devastated if it doesn't go well, or if it doesn't fall, or if it falls through and you can't go on the vacation or the retreat gets canceled or whatever it is. That's where we have to look into.
Yeah, I think that there must be something like that going on, that there is some sort of sense of agency. It's weird, again, because it doesn't have the really hard, I mean, before it really felt like there was someone here.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel that way with the I don't know how else to say it. I can't find the word I'm really looking for here, but it doesn't have the degree of that was once there, where it really it felt like there was someone doing it, and that was very believable. Now it's less well defined. It's a much more vague sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it still does feel like there is something happening here that creates results out there.
Yeah. And on one level of speaking, it's true, right? Everything is conditions of causes and effect.
Right,
So on one hand, it is true that if you scrape a match against the striker, you are probably going to get a flame. Maybe you'll
right,
have to do it a couple times, but you know, you put two things together that combust, and you know, you touch a match to gasoline, probably going to get a flame or an explosion. Like
sure,
this is how things work. If you you know, walk out the door, then strip off all your clothes, you're probably going to get arrested. You know, like there are, there are ramifications to actions.
sure,
The question is, what was the motivation for walking out of the door and stripping off all the clothes? You know, did it feel like you were doing it intentionally for a purpose? Did you want to get arrested? Did you, you know, what we want to look into the experience of it, but also recognizing that, of course, if you make plans to go on vacation, there is a reasonable chance probably that it might actually happen, but we have no idea. Anything could intervene between now and then, and you know,
right,
anything can happen. Um, so you, however, will not go on vacation if you don't buy the tickets and, you know, plan to do it most likely. You know, I mean, it could be a spontaneous thing where somebody comes up to your house, you know, they're like, "Hey, we're going on vacation, come with us," and then you just hop in the car. But it's much less likely than if you do it the other way around, right?
right,
So we have to address both the relative level where that sort of thing does happen, and the ultimate level where realistically there isn't anybody in there who is doing those things. And moreover, there is no free will for you to be making the choice of whether to strip off your clothes and walk outside or book that trip. All of that is, again, one more effect in a whole line of causes and effects, which goes all the way back to every person, insect, atom that you have been in contact with for the entirety of your life, but as well as everybody else that you have ever been in contact with, all of their lives, and everything going all the way back to the Big Bang. You know, it is such a web of interconnected causality that
sure.
no way to just say that you completely removed from everything else have decided to book a vacation and then you're going to book a vacation. There are billions and trillions and quadrillions of other causes that had to have come into play for you to even have the idea to do it, to be able to have the money to do it, to have the technology and everything else to be able to do it, to know where you want to even go, to know that a vacation even exists. I mean, all of that has there's just so many things involved that you can't even fathom just to even do that one thing. So that was never under your control to begin with.
Yeah, that was brilliant. You're right. And it's not the planning that is there's not an issue with planning. I mean, planning, just like you said, planning happens just as a result of all of the other nearly infinite number of variables that are required for that to happen.
Yeah.
It's, and I realized this while I was listening to you, it kind of hit me. It's the belief in control
Mm.
that's the sticking point. You know, this, and like I said, I've watched it happen. I'll watch myself do something, and I can see that there's this belief that if I do this, this will happen. And yeah, there's a, you know, in most cases, there's a pretty high degree of probability that that's going to be realized, because if it didn't, no one would ever bother trying to do anything because they figured it's
Right.
futile anyway.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know how else to say it besides what I've already said. It's just this sense of control, this sense of doing something to get a result, when, like we've said, odds are it's going to happen. But I guess it's sort of this lack of recognition of the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty in there too. You know, it's a gamble. It may not go off the way that you think it is.
No. No. super possible. I mean, anything can intervene, and we just don't know. We never have even a fraction of the information that would be necessary to know whether a plan is going to come to fruition or not.
Right,
Um, but what you say, the really interesting thing in there is the belief in the ability to have control. And I
right,
think this also ties in with when you said that there's the buy-in of the sense of a self.
right.
What there's a commonality there between what is causing that buy-in of the sense of a self and the feeling of the belief in having control. There's something which is giving you the false indication that there is something there which can control something and which is also this self. So it's important to see what in your experience is actually causing that buy-in or that belief.
I agree, and that's sort of the big question,
Yeah.
and go ahead.
Well, yeah. So when it comes to like the feeling of control, right? I mean, you've done the exercises before where you've seen clearly that there isn't any in the moment. But when you feel that there is, right, you have done, different like hand flipping exercises or,
Yeah,
you know, choosing which mug to drink from, or even the thing that we were just saying with like, are you controlling the awareness of being, or the attention to be focused on the screen versus the monster who's still behind you? Is there any, is that does that feel like it's under your conscious control?
no, it doesn't. But I'll also kind of qualify that and say that it seems like there are times where there's sort of this forgetting that goes along with it, and that probably it just ties into what you said about this having to be seen over and over and over and become integrated. So
So the belief that you have control, how is that belief exhibiting itself in your life?
it seems like it's the result of one, an assumption and going to do something, and that the desired result will happen. But there's also this I had it and then I lost it. There were two parts to that, and I've lost the second part, unfortunately. I cannot recall what that other thing was.
It happens.
So we'll just have to go with that for the time being. That this assumption of being able to obtain the result that's wanted.
Hmm. That's really good. So you have an idea that there's something that you want, and there's a feeling that you can do something to get it.
Right.
So let's take, do you have something that you want right now, for instance?
Um, well, the reason I'm laughing is because the first thing that came up was, and it's just funny that, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, funny that there's this desire for the full realization of this process,
Hmm.
which, I mean, yeah, that's pretty funny when it gets said out loud because, I mean, it's not how it works, not generally anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why I was laughing. But on a more practical or more, I guess, immediate level. Okay, I'd like this office chair to be more comfortable.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you have like a thing that you would do though for that? Like, because we're looking for something that you would be able to control and change.
Sure, and I do. I will. You probably noticed, frequently move around. So
Yep.
I'll sit like this for a while. It works for a while. Then I do this
Yep.
in order to make it more comfortable
Yeah.
for as long as
Yeah.
that lasts.
As long as it lasts. So good. So in the moment, right, which maybe isn't right now because you've already moved, but if there's a feeling of wanting something to be more, the chair to be more comfortable, there is right now a discomfort that's happening, right? There's something that feels like this isn't great. Maybe my butt hurts, maybe there's a pain in my back, there's something going on. There's an idea that comes up that something could be otherwise. I
Right.
could have a butt that doesn't hurt. I could have a back that feels really, really good and solid and supported. So you're now comparing, you're doing a fifth, fetter thing where you're comparing what could be using the mind to what actually is. And that thought about what could be is now instigating a feeling of extra discomfort because this is something that's right in your reach. All you have to do to get this thing is to just relocate, stand up, do a little thing,
Right. Just change my posture.
change your posture. I would like for you to be able to feel into that sense of discomfort and that sense of urge to move and see, are you creating, first of all, the discomfort of being in an uncomfortable chair?
Okay.
And then secondly, that urge to move, very similar to having an itch and holding off on scratching it or having a mosquito land on your face and not immediately brushing it off. Do you feel how that feels in the body? That urge to want to move?
That one is not as pronounced as the first one. You mentioned two things.
Hmm.
You said, "Do you create the discomfort?" And so that's more prominent at the moment. And no, I don't. I
Good.
mean,
So
that just arises naturally as a result of causes and conditions,
good. So discomfort is there.
right?
But now the feeling, do you have the feeling that you would like to stand up and move and readjust yet?
The desire to change posture is building.
Okay, good.
I
So
can I can feel the beginnings of it.
good. So let's wait and we'll just let it kind of keep building so that you can really feel what it's like to really want to move and not be able to at the moment.
Okay.
So just feel the discomfort coming. Know that you can't move, can't do anything about it. This discomfort that's there is only going to get worse. Notice, first off, if you're getting more of those physical sensations in the body, that feels like a sort of pull to action. Like it's like trying to do something, wanting to do something, urging you to take action in some way. Notice also if there are any mental images or sounds that are saying, you know, like you're picturing yourself moving or saying, man, this chair is really uncomfortable. Or anything that's reinforcing that sense that you really should be moving, you really should be moving, there's something wrong here, it's only going to get worse, you might actually hurt yourself if you stay like this, you could become paralyzed. It could be that bad. No, notice anything, and no matter how inc- over the top, blown out it is or how subtle it might be.
It's right now. It's just showing up as a not quite a contraction, more of just a tension in the body.
Mhm. Good. And that tension can be enough to make it feel like you need to do something. If we don't really pay attention to it, that tension is like a trigger for the body to go, oop, time to move, time to release this, time to get out and change it. And you can have the ideas about doing it, but does it feel like you are the one who is actually in charge of doing it?
If I'm looking directly at it, no. If I'm looking directly at it in real time, it's pretty clear that it's something that's just happening naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Where it becomes kind of less clear
Mm-hmm.
is when it's happening on its own and it's not really being paid attention to. It's not being looked at in a really clear way. Because what happens then is there's a tendency for this. To me, it seems nonverbal. We've talked about this, about how that really doesn't happen. But there's this stuff that shows up that doesn't actually show up fully formed in words,
Yep.
but it is kind of a mental talk that isn't heard clearly. I don't know how to describe that, but it it assumes that that was something that was done intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things there. So if we back up for a moment and take even a more tricky example of where it seems like there's something that you can do that isn't just as simple as the body moving and switching around in the chair. If we take something where like you have to pay your taxes, you have to go either fill out the forms yourself or take them to somebody, but you got to collect all your documents, do all that stuff, right?
Right,
Feels like this is something that you have to do or else it's not going to get done.
right,
So it feels like there's a sense of agency here. But if you notice the idea of having to do it, there's probably a feeling of this same similar sort of a tension in the body. It's not the pain of sitting in an uncomfortable chair, but there's something that feels unresolved, some sort of a physical tension, which is giving rise to this need to do something about it. Now, it's possible to collect your tax stuff and do it without feeling particularly aggrieved by it or stressed out, as an instigator to action. Some
right,
people can't do anything until the stress is built up to such a point that they have to, it goes to the very, very peak before they actually take action on it. But my point is that there is probably something going on in the body anytime you have a thought about doing the taxes that is making it feel like I have to do that. But it's really an I have to get rid of this sensation. It's not as much the I have to actually do the taxes. It's that I feel uncomfortable with with the ambiguity of not having the taxes done, of the knowing something is hanging over the head that, this has to be something that has to be taken care of or else there are consequences. And that brings up some sort of feeling in the body. So that's something to look for. Then on the other side of that, once you actually start collecting it and you start doing the stuff, at what point does it feel like you are making the decision that, okay, this is the moment now I'm going to go collect the documents and start tallying up everything? Did you make that decision? Did you choose in that moment that this is the moment out of all the other moments? You could get up at 3 a.m. and start doing it. Why are you not doing it then? You could do it first thing in the morning. Why are you not doing it then? You could have done it at is the stroke of midnight on December 30th, well, January 1st. You could have started getting some things ready before you had all of your W-2s and 1099s and all of it.
right.
You could, there's a certain time that you could have started this at any point, but you didn't. You could wait until the day before taxes are due and to do it. So there's something that's motivating you in that moment that you actually choose to start doing it. And it's interesting to notice why that is then. Not because we want to make a story about it and say, well, I should have done it before, or I could have waited to do it even later. And this says that I'm a person who likes to procrastinate or something else. We're not doing that. It's just like what is happening right in the instant when you go from now's the day and then do it. How does that feel to be making that choice in that moment? And then right afterwards, when you feel the relief of, I finally started doing it, I finally got it done, what does it feel like to have taken credit for making that choice and performing all of those behaviors?
Yeah, it's kind of coming back to me now. I've kind of lost sight of this. We talked about this in the group months ago.
Did we?
Huh?
Did we? I have such a bad memory.
Man, well, I've got to say something about that briefly. Memory has started to really take a hit lately. It's funny because I can remember that and I can remember details about things, but
Yeah.
I can't remember a conversation I had yesterday. Or Susanna will say something to me about a show we watched. We watched that and I have no recall at all. It's like it never happened.
Yeah. I will say, A, we're getting old. B, it can very much have to do with the awakening process. C, it also is very much indicative of burnout. Super common if you're experiencing burnout to have difficulty concentrating, hard time recalling, accessing memory, um, lack of motivation and energy and enthusiasm and all of that stuff, all part and parcel. So something to also consider that it might be
Sure.
in that line.
And sleep deprivation.
Yeah, also.
That's sort of an ongoing issue. So,
Yeah.
and
So there are definitely some complicating factors there that might be contributing to it.
yeah, and you're right. It kills me though when I can't remember, like I said, and give the example I gave, but I can remember a conversation that I had 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's
It
almost like
does.
there are certain types of memory that are affected and there are other types of memory that aren't.
Yeah.
But back to what you were saying, we went up, we talked about that in group back in, I don't know, like sometime in the fall.
Uh,
And in fact, the example you used was what was just happening a minute ago with a dog pawing at the door. And
uh-huh.
don't get up, wait,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really feel like, really get a sense of what's going on, be able to feel what's happening in the body that's driving that. Once you do, then very carefully watch yourself go to open the door.
Yeah.
And that sounds like that's something that needs to be revisited for a while because it's been these affirmations and these other types of inquiry, which are all incredibly useful and helpful and necessary. But it sounds like that kind of needs to be added back into the mix, because this assumption in the moment that there's someone doing something that needs to be seen through. That needs to be seen clearly that there's not someone making a decision, taking the action to go do something
Yeah.
as it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we talked about integration and really putting it back into daily life where you are noticing these things, not just in the few minutes where you ponder them on a cushion, but taking them really into life. And how is this in this moment? How does it feel like I have control over the situation? In this moment, do I recognize what the next words are going to become, or do I know what the next words are going to be coming out of my mouth? In this moment, does it feel like I'm taking ownership over having agency, over having a self? Is there something about uh, my experience as a musician or anything else that is right now an indication of me and how it feels to be me in this moment. And just get curious about what is actually happening there.
Repeat that part about the indication that there's a me. I caught
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah. Yeah. So like even if you're sitting there playing guitar and you're having like a good guitar day and you're playing, what is it in that moment that feels like it's reflecting on you as a guitarist, you as a person who has done a lot of years of practice, you who is particularly pleased with your playing today, you who's getting enjoyment out of it. Feel into all of that to see how that's actually being experienced.
and when you say how it's actually being experienced, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, one of the five senses or multiple of the five senses.
Okay.
What is coming up? Are you having a feeling in the body that feels positive, but something where you're feeling the like solidity of yourself of the body really, but are you taking that bodily sense to be indicative of the you who is sitting here holding a guitar, who is actively making the notes come out, that sort of thing? Are you having some sort of mental image or self-talk that is reinforcing the sense of, man, I'm really good today. Like this really feels good. I can't believe I'm playing this. However it's coming out, what is happening there, and what is all of the ripples that involves. We can have one
Mhm.
idea of, this is a really good guitar day for me, and then that brings up all the other bad guitar days, all the things that it says about me and why I'm so much better today than I was yesterday, any number of things. So there are, it's just, and it's not to go down the rabbit hole with each of them and figure like, oh well, this is because I have been practicing so much and it's because I don't know, I've paid my dues, and well, we're not creating the story. We're just being aware of what's showing up that's creating in this little individual moment the feeling of being the self who is a good guitar player and who feels pride in that in this moment.
So what you're saying is don't get caught up in conceptualizing about it. Just be aware of what it is that's creating this sense. Take that in, see it clearly, and then stop there. You don't need to go any further with it.
Exactly. This is a snapshot, and it's like a murder who done it, where all you have to figure it out is a snapshot of the crime scene. And it's like, here is your crime scene, what has happened, and you have to look at just that and piece together all the clues of what happened in that moment. And that's our experience of a self right now. We're not going back to all of this other past history. All we have to decide or to determine what it feels like to be a self is present right in this second, right when you check in.
And even if we could maintain that attention for 20 minutes, it doesn't go any further than that. It's just taking in the sensory data.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And what of that makes it seem that there is a self here? What part of the sensory data, the five senses that you can pick up, internal or external, which of those is indicating that there is a self here? Because it's all you have to work on.
Right.
All you have is this snapshot of the crime scene of there being a self.
Well, you know what happens? Not, I don't know if frequently, but it's something that comes up consistently when doing those sorts of inquiries is seeing that it's the body in this way. Okay, so their thoughts, mental pictures, and so all of the sensory information is accounted for. And then what happens is there's this thought that, this nagging sense that there's something I'm overlooking. There's something that's being missed. But it doesn't matter how hard you go digging into that, it, it never is found. but it doesn't stop the mind from going down that path of overlooking something. There's something that's being missed. Surely, if we just dig more, we'll find it.
Ju- Just checking. Is the over is the feeling of what's being overlooked the actual looker? If there's
Huh.
if there's a feeling that you are looking at physical sensations and looking at and being aware of the mental images and sounds, you've cataloged all of that. Is it that knowing faculty, that feeling of being the one who is feeling or seeing the images, that seems to be the thing that's giving you the indication that you are overlooking something?
I think so, which of course you realize what this brings us back to.
I do.
Okay, yeah,
Walked right into the minefield of the knower.
yep. And therein lies the rub.
Yep,
So what
completely.
the heck do we do with that?
You investigate what it is to know something, and it brings us back to that whole issue where I think it gets easier seeing it through the sixth Fetter kind of a lens, where we recognize that there is only sensation and there is no witness of the sensation. Until that point, we have this feeling of something which is always watching the internal visual screen, something that is feeling the senses, but from a distance, right?
Yeah.
Like right
Well,
now,
huh?
well, like right now, feel the bottom of your left foot. Can you feel it?
Yes.
Okay. Does it feel like the sensation of the left foot, the bottom of the left foot, is at a distance from you?
Not really. I mean to answer honestly,
Yeah.
there's an awareness of the inferred distance,
Hmm.
but if I can even set that aside just a little,
Hmm.
then it's just no, the sensation of the left foot is just right here.
Excellent. Excellent. That's a very good answer. Um, so can you get a sense of the inferred distance? What is causing that inference that it should be further down?
It seems like it's an idea.
Mhm. Can you get a sense of where this idea is coming from? Do you have a mental image, like a mental schema of the
Yes.
body?
Yes, I absolutely do. And it was right there the whole time, and I was overlooking it.
There you go.
That's funny.
So does it feel like you are looking down from above at
Yeah,
this
that's
foot?
exactly what was happening. It
Yeah.
was to the point of, my legs are crossed right now sitting in this chair,
Yep.
and there was even, seeing crossed legs.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So it feels like it's lower because we're seeing a mental image telling us that it's lower. But as you so deftly saw through the sixth Fetter version of it, it's really not. It's right here. It's as close as can be because the only thing that's keeping it pushed away is that internal mental image, which seems to be putting it at a distance.
well, the interesting thing is it requires a mental image because when the eyes are open, the only thing that creates that inference is this idea that, okay, so they're over there sitting in a chair, and they're actually 5 feet something tall, not
Yep.
4 inches, you
Yep.
know, all of that. So it seems like it's all utterly dependent on whether it's eyes open, visual input, or mental pictures. Without that, it seems like the whole house of cards comes down.
It largely does. Yeah. Yep. The whole sense of distance thing is this whole mental overlay that we're putting on it based off of these rather complicated calculations that the brain is doing. That's saying based on color and shading and shadows and the idea of permanence where we have somebody who is right up close next to us and then we watch them get further and further away. And it just doesn't calculate for us that the person is shrinking in size. We have to just, right?
That's great.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
So logically, they're just getting further away. But we know if we drop that, they just shrink. People get bigger and smaller.
Can you imagine if you could train someone to see that from early age and
Yeah,
they had to live their whole life like that?
I know. I know. And we had the opposite. Do you remember this Grover on the Sesame Street teaching you near and far?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how we learned the opposite. That's how we learned that just because he's small here, he's far, and then near,
Yeah.
far. And so that's how we learn, because that is actually how we come into life, not recognizing that that's the case. We have
Yeah.
to learn the sense of perspective and that sense of distance.
So
So
Sesame Street is a vast conspiracy.
it is, yeah. You can totally thank Sesame Street for completely, completely creating the sixth fetter for all of us.
That's great.
Thank you, Jim Henson. Um, but yeah, but that's so. This is the thing: is that uh, both the distance thing is this overlay, but then the other part of that, other part of the sixth fetter, is that it still feels like there's something in here which as something which is in here which is at a distance from something out there. And even if that something out there is actually the visual field, which is as close to here as we can possibly get,
Right.
still feels like there is something in here which is aware of that mental screen, the visual field, the sound field, the physical sensations. It always feels, until we see through that, that there is something in here which is separate from the other things out there that are at a distance from it.
Yes. Uh, and that's what you just described is something else that's contributing to this assumption of there being someone. That if there's that thing over there, then there must be someone observing it.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's the collapsing of that sense of an observer or a witness, which helps to drop the idea that there's a knower, that there's something there which, if you have the sense that I am the one who is looking for a self, I might not be the self, but there's something here which is at a distance from the sensations and from the mental images and from the sound, mental sounds, and all of that. So if it feels like at first like I'm a self, there is something here which is turning around, looking at and investigating all of these sensations, but it's not synonymous with the sensations. It still feels like there's something which is taking it all in and aggregating it into, oh, well, I've looked and I can't find it. So that is reifying that sense of being the knower or the witness or the seer or feeler or the hearer.
You know, this brings to mind something that happened to me some years back, where it was while sitting and meditating, and it's hard to describe the actual event itself, but I'll just describe it as there was a sensation in the body, or no, it was a feeling, it was like joy or anxiety or something. I can't remember what it was, but it was a fairly strong feeling sense. And as it appeared, the thought in the mind that showed up was feelings feel themselves. At the
Mm-hmm.
time, it seemed profound, but I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And over time, and more recently, that started to become clear. So there's something in all of this system that recognizes that it's just a matter of getting that at a deeper level.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really feeling it to be absolutely the case. And then again, integration. Um, but like right now, right? Like, see if it's easier to do. Let's take the visual field. It's slightly trickier, but I think it's super useful for when it clicks, right?
Okay.
If you look at the wall in front of you, does it feel like the wall is somewhere out there at a distance, some feet away?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, good. Does it feel like there is something here which is at that distance, the other end, right? Like if we picture that there's a line being drawn from the wall out there to someplace here where it's going to be interpreted or seen, where is that near end point of the line connected?
So in other words, the thing that's registering the wall,
Yeah,
where does that line from the wall to it connect?
exactly.
Okay. Hmm. Well, it's not really clear in a sharp, defined way. I could only say that in a general way, it seems to kind of land somewhere about here.
Good.
I mean,
Good.
except it's within the confines of the body.
Sure. Good, good, good. So if you relax yourself, this is much easier when we relax. So allow the focus of the wall, instead of being on one small spot right in the middle, widen the peripheral vision. Get a sense of the entire panorama of your view as it currently is. And then what I like to think of is, if you relax and you just allow what's there to be there without trying to see anything special, without trying to focus out on it, if you relax down into the body, feel the attention going down towards the stomach, even while you're still seeing the totality of the visual field. Does the wall itself seem to be getting closer in a sense? The more you relax, the more you take in the periphery. It might even help to take in the periphery of the feelings of the body itself, the sort of spaciousness around the side of the body.
I wouldn't say the distance closes,
Mhm.
but the sense of here and there is not as pronounced.
Good. Okay, so stay out there. Stay looking at this panorama in front of you. What is it that is giving you the feeling that there is something here which is separate from that wall?
It seems to just simply be this idea that, and it's not even verbal. It, I mean, not clearly. I mean,
Mhm.
it's pretty vague. Just sort of this assumed idea that if there's something there, then which that sets up the distance, then there must be something that's observing from over here.
Okay, so let's get even more specific.
Okay.
Can you get a feeling for the physical sensations of the face, around the eyes, the mouth, the nose?
Okay.
does it feel like the wall is on that side of the nose and the face, and that you are on this side of it?
Hmm. Hmm. Yes and no. I mean, there is that sense, but at the same time, don't really know how to express that. Um, Let me see if I can get it back. It does, but it's not in a real hard, very defined way where the distance feels, I don't know how else to put it, this isn't going to be very helpful, I don't think. The distance doesn't feel real.
Good, really good. So notice if is there any correlation between the physical sensations of the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the chest? Is there any correlation between those sensations and the visual field? Does one have any bearing on the other?
It seems like it does.
But feel into it. Allow the sensations to be there and allow the visual field to be there. And see if you can feel if you can see if you can see the visual field completely independent of the physical sensations.
Yes.
Good. How how do you recognize that there's something which is in here that is seeing the visual field, taking it all in as one giant mural? Everything that you're looking at is like one big painted mural. How do you get the impression that there is something in here which is separate from this visual field?
I really don't know.
Does it feel like there is something here which is taking in the visual field like a person sitting in a movie theater looking at a screen?
Hmm. Sort of, but the what's being taken in as the movie screen is not only the visual field, but also the sensations of the face.
Hmm. So I really want you to get clear on them being in this for this exercise
Mhm.
completely separate.
Okay.
That there are other exercises we do where they're not so separate, but
Okay.
in this case, it helps to recognize that what is felt like a physical barrier between the me and the outside wall is just sensation, which is appearing in a completely different plane, a completely different existence from the visual field itself.
Okay, I can see that.
Amazing. The actual fact of it, scientifically speaking, the image that you are seeing right now is being created in the brain.
Right.
So the wall is not outside of you on the other side of your nose. It is actually happening right in the brain.
Right.
It might actually help. Are you nearsighted or farsighted?
Nearsighted.
Okay, try taking off your glasses. And notice if you're looking at the wall without the I don't know if you can see the frames of your glasses or anything, but sometimes it's easier if we take them off to recognize the panorama of the vision and that it is absolutely as close as can be everything that is showing up without anything being a seer of it at a distance from it, has no relation to the physical sensations in the body. It is just an image showing up every bit as close as if you have a mental image of, right now, if you close your eyes and you think of a purple tulip,
Hmm.
that's happening just as close as when you open your eyes and you look at the wall. They're happening in the same space. Remember to not strain. Keep being very relaxed, very panorama. You just allow it to settle. If you have a mental image happening of the body, of the face, of something which seems to be separate from the wall, just recognize that it's there and that that is just another mental image appearing in the same place as the wall. It's not a you that is at a distance from it. They're effectively overlaid. It's almost a little bit like we have a complex 3D visual image in the mind where we can recreate an external world and also have a separate place slightly removed from some of the mental images that are happening, like the mental representation of the body. But in fact, they are all happening right in the same space. Can you get a sense of it at all?
Yeah, it starts to, and then it will start to happen, and then it will recede.
Yeah, it's okay. You don't have to force it. Just keep kind of playing with it because that's weakening that um the feeling of there being something in here which is, that camera or that viewer, that project,
Right.
that knower.
Yeah, I can start to get it for just brief moments.
Mm. Sometimes it can almost feel a little claustrophobic at first because it feels like things are so close and so big. And we sometimes even get like a little fear response when it starts to shift over.
I think that's actually the barrier right there, is
Yeah.
that it wasn't it wasn't a really strong or a pronounced sense of fear, but there was just a little glimmer of it,
Yeah.
and so it would start to shift. The sense of distance would begin to disappear, and then that little bit of fear, and everything would go back to
Yeah.
its place. So
Totally okay. Something we just keep playing with.
yeah, I was gonna say I think if I just keep working with it, in time I'll get it, because
Yeah.
there's that fear response, but there's also something else that recognizes that everything's okay. But this is one of many doorways to freedom.
Absolutely.
So nothing to be afraid of. It's perfectly fine.
Yep.
This is the exit door you've been looking for.
Absolutely. But we still have something in the body that's trying to maintain a sense of stability and safety and predictability. And when things start to belie that, we can get that little panic response or that little bit of fear that comes up that's like, I don't know, alarm bells, this doesn't seem to be right. I think this isn't the way that I'm normally used to experiencing the world. You might be breaking something. Uh, you can just let it, it's okay. It's okay. Some reassurance. It's all right. This is
Yeah,
fine. There's nothing dangerous here.
it's it seems perfectly doable, as long as some part of the mind is allowed some time to
Yeah.
work up to it. Is what seems like is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'll
Yeah.
just continue to play with that.
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Um,
this is a great thing to do when car trips or waiting in a doctor's office or
yeah.
those sorts of things.
Just don't do it while driving.
No,
But the rest of the car trip, if you're the passenger, then yes, it's really, really good.
it's funny you should say that about driving, because the Douglas Harding had that one experiment, the pointing and then turning the finger back on itself.
Yeah.
The result of that, that what happens as a result of that, is something that happens very naturally almost anytime I'm in a car. If I'm driving, then everything falls away.
That's amazing. And does it feel like you're stationary and everything is coming at you?
There are times, it doesn't always feel that way, but there are times when it definitely does.
Yeah.
Which that it's always interesting when that happens, because it reminds me of that used to happen to me when I was a kid, when I first learned to ride a bike.
Yeah.
I would be on a bike going down the street, and all of a sudden everything was moving past me. And there was never any thought about it. It
Yeah.
seemed perfectly natural. Like, hey, cool. You know, there wasn't any fear. Like, what is this? This is strange. You
Yeah.
know,
I don't remember it as a kid. I remember the first time that it was like such a pronounced, like, whoa. I was in college and I was driving home on a highway and I had a big truck in front of me and I must have had my speed locked exactly where he was. So we were exactly, with cruise control, the same speed. And then we just were sitting perfectly still and everything else was just passing by. And it was like, this is wild. Like it was so weird. Um, yeah, it didn't take much, but it was having that reference point of something else which seemed to be stable and sitting still the same as me, and then everything else just going right past us. It was really fascinating.
yeah, it's that's interesting how that works.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And if I sometimes it happens without any thought, but there are a lot of times where it is the result of remembering it, and then in remembering it, it's kind of similar to this in the way that relax and stop thinking about it, you just kind of quiet the mental activity around it, and then
Yep.
and then suddenly everything's going past.
Yep. Exactly.
You
Yeah, I
know,
think that struggle and strain really creates the feeling of
mm,
self, doer, witness, distance, all of that. It's really relaxation is such a key for all of this because
mm.
we're reinforcing the thing that we're trying to see through. If we really feel like we have to struggle and tense up and focus and get in line and figure it out and learn and all of that.
I'm glad you said that because I had never that had never occurred to me.
Yeah. Super, 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 super important.
Okay,
Relaxation is absolutely key here.
okay. Well, then that's that's something that will have to get incorporated into this. Remembering to relax.
Yeah. I used to have that in the very first thing that I would write when I was guiding through LU. I had a little paragraph. It was like one of the very first things I would write is that in this process, relaxation is key. Um, Most important thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's that will. There's no doubt in my mind that that's going to get incorporated into all of the things that I do in inquiry and investigation that happen over the course of a day. That's one of those things that the mind tends to just kind of grab a hold of and just
Good. Yeah.
so.
Super, super good. All right. I
Okay,
think it's been a long day. I think I'm getting tired.
that's fine. I understand. It's like, as I mentioned earlier, I never get enough sleep, which I'm working on it and trying to do something about it. So all days feel kind of long.
I get that. Completely get that. Yeah.
And it's not bad. It's just there's this that curious illusion of duration.
Yep. Yep. I know. It's a weird thing, and I know I don't also get enough sleep at the moment. Not for lack of trying, but
Right?
the body's been waking up early and just be like, all right, that's it. But it's kind of dragging. So
Yeah.
something's not quite right. But
Uh, I hope
yeah,
you can figure it out and take care of it.
thank you. Likewise with you. I, I think, stress plays such a big factor on it, and whether we're feeling it like really consciously and really, you know, embodying it, or if it's just a low level thing that's underneath the surface that the body is working with, it still results in the same thing. We still end up having difficult time sleeping, and all sorts of things come from it, even if it's not like constantly ruminating about something that you're stressed about. It's like the body still is knowing and reacting to that presence.
Huh. Okay. Well, that's. I'm glad you mentioned that because that that's something to work with in terms of remembering to pay attention to how that is happening in the body. Because for me, unless there's something major going on, it's usually just low level stuff, and I don't tend to notice it.
Yeah, and it really does factor into everything.
Yeah, I don't doubt.
Yeah.
That would explain at least some of it's just bad habits, but there's a portion of the difficulty in sleeping that I think is a result of that, and I just haven't been noticing it.
Yeah, I got that.
Coincidental timing that you should say that when Suzanne and I are both actually actively working on trying to improve that
Oh,
because
amazing.
it's getting to both of us. So
Yeah, I got that.
when you
Well,
can nod off at a moment's notice, something needs to be taken care of.
you're really deprived at that point.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I wish you luck sorting it out and figuring out how to reduce the stress load and the burnout and all of that, because I think it's going to be, yeah, you really have to just be kind to yourself and the body and relax it, take care of it, and just do what it needs to recharge.
Well, and breaking the habit of telling that story every time I would get up to do something in the house, which we talked about that goes back several months too.
Yeah.
that's helped a lot because I think that habit has been largely and almost entirely broken. I mean, I get close to it. Like earlier today, there was dog pee in the hall. I cleaned it up and then I walked around to go put something back from cleaning it up, and there was more. Wow, great! Somebody else, here's more of it.
Yeah.
And saying that out loud, there was sort of this recognition of, well, that's kind of in the ballpark. I mean, there wasn't as much of that sense of, oh God,
Yeah.
about it. It was actually meant half humorously.
Yep. Totally.
But at any rate, so thankfully, as a result of that conversation, a large amount of that has just been just cut off.
Amazing.
I do a lot of things around here now, and there's not any of this sense of, well, here's this guy doing this for the 9 millionth time. It's just, well, we're taking care of this thing.
Amazing. Really, really happy to hear that.
Yeah. And I'm happy to be able to report it because it makes things a lot easier.
It does, doesn't it? I know.
Yeah,
I
it
know.
really does. Plus, there's a deeper implication too of generating that story every time and keeping that going over long spans of time. That seems like that would make this process more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah. 100%. It's just feeding into the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Well done.
well, thank you. So, thanks. I mean, thanks to you. You
Thanks.
had everything to do with that. So, I'm grateful to your presence in my life to be able to make those kind of changes.
Thanks, man. But really, thank you for putting into action. You could hear the stuff, but it's all about taking it and running with it.
Well, I don't do suffering well.
That's a really good attribute to have in this path.
Yeah. So, I mean, once upon a time I did. Once upon a time I was a great victim, but not anymore. So, no thanks.
That's amazing.
But anyway, well, with that, I know you're tired, so I'll let you go.
Thank you.
Hopefully, take it easy and enjoy some downtime.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. You too. And I'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, see you in a couple of weeks.
All right. Keep me
All right,
posted on things.
I will. All
Take
right,
care.
you
Thanks,
too.
man. Bye.
Bye.